I'd just like to welcome everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the D&I Soundbite Series, which is brought to you by the DCU Centre of Excellence for Diversity and Inclusion. I'm Dr. Kim Connick and I'm an Equality Officer here in DCU. We know that people are juggling a lot at the moment and have a very, very busy so it can be hard to fit in moments of learning or expanding your knowledge. So we've designed this series of lightning talks to give you fast, quick insights into topical and relevant D&I themes. Today I'm going to speak to you about socioeconomic disadvantage and how this is often a hidden disadvantage here in Ireland. I hope you find this session interesting and thought-provoking. I'm going to present for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then I'll open things up to the floor for questions. Please send us in any of your questions via the chat box just down at the bottom of your screen, and please submit them directly to DCU Centre of Excellence by clicking chat and then changing the everyone to just DCU Centre of Excellence. As a reminder, this series will be recorded and shared on our website at a later date. And just can I ask that everyone keeps their mics muted while I'm presenting? As I said, I'm Dr. Kim Connick, and I actually did my PhD and degree here in DCU, and then I became the Equality Officer. So socioeconomic disadvantage is something that's really, I suppose, I'm really passionate about, and I'm really I think it's really important, and I think it's going to become more important now. That the Minister for Children, Disability, Equality, Integration and Youth, Roderick O'Gorman, is actually seeking a public consultation on making socioeconomic disadvantage the 10th ground of the Equal Status Act. So as most of us will know, that this would make it illegal to discriminate against someone based on socioeconomic background. And he's described this because this is something that we find really tough in Ireland, is how to describe socioeconomic disadvantage. Because whilst in the UK they often use the class system, that's not as well ingrained in Irish society. So the minister is describing socioeconomic disadvantage to include things like your address, your accent, your family background, and your educational background. So I think organisations are going to really start focusing on this area in the coming months, especially if it's becoming a 10th ground. It's going for public consultation, and then it's looking at being brought forward in front of the Dáil next year, and early next year is the aim. So when I talk about socioeconomic diversity and socioeconomic disadvantage, I'm often told that people that it doesn't really matter in Ireland, and that people should get roles based on their merit, and that it doesn't really matter if you're poor or not, or the school that you go to when you're in primary school or secondary school. If you're bright enough, you'll get there. So I'm going to just talk to you about my two friends. So first of all, we have my friend Sean. My friend Sean was born on the 10th of November 1990. And he was born in the Coombe Hospital in Dublin, here in Dublin. And he was born into a one-parent family. It was just him and his mum. And his mum is actually a factory worker. And she brought him home to their flat in Ballymun, and they lived in the flat until the early 2000s, when, because of Ballymun regeneration, they moved into a house. Sean went to the local primary school. It was a DEIS 1 primary school, and DEIS is the title given to primary schools and secondary schools in disadvantaged areas, and they're graded by DEIS 1 or DEIS 2, DEIS 1 being worse, I suppose, and more disadvantaged than DEIS 2. It's based on the location of the primary school. And Sean, when he was in primary school, developed a inner city North Dublin accent, and became friends with a lot of people from his area. And then he went on to the local secondary school, also a DEIS 1 secondary school. And in secondary school, he became really into soccer, and became friends with lots of people. A lot of people who he started first year with didn't go on actually and make it to sixth year. They dropped out kind of after junior cert. But Sean actually was the first one in his family to do his Leaving Cert, and then he actually got on into college, and he was one of only 15% of people in his secondary school in Ballymun to go on to college. And he got into DCU through the Access program, and into our accounting and finance degree. And when he got into DCU, he absolutely loved it, really enjoyed it. But he worked a part-time job in retail to help him get by through college, because he had to pay for college himself, and also to help out at home, because Sean actually had a bunch of brothers and sisters and things like that, and he wanted to help his mum out. So he went through summers in DCU doing working full-time in retail and things like that. And then in the summer from third year into fourth year, he did intra, and he got his intro just with a local accountancy firm, because he was doing accounting and finance. Then he after he finished up in DCU, he did really well in his exams, but he didn't get into the first few graduate programs that he applied for, but eventually he got into a graduate program. So this is a fairly standard route that a lot of our undergraduates all over Ireland would take, and Sean was the only one in his secondary school to go to DCU. But when I talk about this, there's actually a lot of roadblocks there that affected Sean, that Sean wasn't really aware of, that they were roadblocks at the time. And Sean's family certainly weren't aware that Sean was meeting roadblocks. They were just delighted that he was actually, had done his Leaving Cert, had gotten to college and had gotten his degree. Because only 4% of people from Ballymun, from Sean's area, actually go on to college and get a degree. So they didn't know any different. They didn't know that there was actually roadblocks there. But in Sean's accounting and finance class in DCU was also David. David was born on the exact same day as Sean, 10th of November 1990, and David was born in Mount Carmel Hospital over the south side of Dublin, and he was born to two parents, his mum and dad. His dad was an accountant and his mum was a solicitor. And David got brought home as a newborn baby to their lovely house in Blackrock. And so David actually went to Montessori before he went to primary school, local primary school, got on fantastically in primary school, made lots of friends in the local area, developed his accent, a South Dublin accent, got into rugby when he was in primary school, went on to his private secondary school, a local private secondary school, got on fantastically in the private secondary school, played rugby in the private secondary school and joined a rugby club. And then went on to DCU through the traditional routes of entering DCU through the CAO. 92% of David's secondary school Leaving Cert class went on to college, and they actually were one of the biggest feeder schools into the highest point courses in Ireland. So things like medicine and even accounting and finance in DCU. When David was in DCU, he actually did an internship. So David's uncle is and his father are both partners in big accountancy firms here in the city, and they got him an internship from first year into second year. So he did a paid internship. It was only 6 weeks, but it was really good, and it gave him a big insight into the working world. And then from second year into third year, David actually did an internship, but he did it as part of his J1 in Manhattan in New York, and got to experience J1 and also international internship. And then so when he applied for his intra, which all DCU students do, from third year into fourth year, they already knew David very well, so they were happy to take him back into this big five firm. And then David applied for one graduate program, the graduate program of the place the firm he'd done his internship in. And of course, they were absolutely delighted to have him. They thought he was brilliant on his 2 internships. So yeah, absolutely delighted, brought him in. So when I talk about these, they both ended up in the same place, Sean and David. They both did very well in DCU. They both got first in their exams, but they definitely had different ways of getting there. And David's life was fast-tracked, I suppose, in how to get to where he was going. They both ended up there at the same place. But what happened now was that they're both finished their graduate programs, and they're actually both turning 30 this November. So they're finished it a while. And what's happened now, David has a lot more experience than Sean and a lot more connections. So David has actually gotten 3 promotions and Sean's only gotten 1, and 20, 30K more than Sean is. And this sounds like it's very polarized and sounds like, oh God, you know, this is that would never happen, but this happens every day. These are based on real people. So I just put up their profiles here, and we've got the Sean's profile here, and the things that we're gonna that this status act is gonna look at is address, family status, accent, and education. So I put those as the first 5 things here. They're both the same age. And here we've got we've got very, very obvious differences in their addresses, in things like their addresses, their family status, family as opposed to 2-parent family, their accent. So Sean actually, by the time he's 30, has actually learned to hide his accent and speaks in a neutral Dublin accent, because speaking with an inner city or North Dublin accent, a strong North Dublin accent, won't get you, like he believes anyway, that it will be a bit of a hindrance to him in his chosen career. Then his family education, he was the first to do the Leaving Cert, so he didn't have that support. He had lots of support at home, but he didn't have the support of the experience of knowing, you know, what to expect, I suppose. And the same kind of came from their from the parents' occupation. So while his mother was the most supportive, you know, flags were out when Sean graduated. There was a parade down the road. His mom has worked in a factory her whole life, so she doesn't actually know what to expect and how to help Sean in kind of the expectations of being an accountant. Whereas David does have a father who's an accountant. And if you've got one parent who's an accountant, you're twice as likely to actually become an accountant. And actually, I'm surprised he didn't become a doctor, because if you've got a doctor who's a parent, you're 24 times more likely to become a doctor than if you don't have a doctor who's a parent. But not even these things. So they're the things that are going to be looked at by the Equal Status Act. But we've got other deeper things here. And so all of this stuff has affected their work history. David got more internships than Sean did, and Sean actually had to work part-time during his degree, so that took up a lot of his study time. But even just down to sports, so soccer, Sean is a big soccer enthusiast, and he plays with his local club in Ballymun. So so he's not getting those networks outside of Ballymun, whereas David plays rugby and golf. And as we know, golf can actually be fantastic with getting networks. And he got one of his internships in Manhattan because his uncle had a round of golf with a partner from the Manhattan office. So it's these little things, those little nuances that really affect kind of your path in life, and just whether things are made slightly easier or slightly harder for you. So I often get asked then, what can we do? Like, how can we help the Seans of the world when they're going up for jobs against the Davids? So I'll say straight off, your recruitment is the first thing. So where we advertise for jobs, you know, if we're only advertising in the Financial Times or through word of mouth through our senior partners, we're probably only getting the Davids of the world. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if we're expecting, you know, socioeconomic diversity, we should be looking at better ways to advertise and how to get into those communities. And next up is the talent pool. So a lot of organizations, and this is actually in Suits, the Netflix show, they only hire from Harvard. Harvard Law, they only hire from. But a specific type of person goes to Harvard Law, so they only get a specific type of person into their law firm. So where we're looking for talent pool, and in Ireland, this, you know, there is a kind of thing of, oh, we'll go to the universities, they'll have the best talent, but we actually have IoTs, you know, NCI, was DIT, now TU Dublin, IT Tala, who are producing just as good a caliber as graduate as we here in DCU or the Trinities of the world are. Next up, we could look at paid internships. So actually giving the Seans of the world an advantage and actually providing a 6-week paid internship from first and second year into third year. And we can link up with access programs. Here in DCU, we have the Access to the Work program, which is providing access students with that, with those work placements. So we can do things like that. Then when it comes down to application, we could look at actually having an application form as opposed to the an application form as opposed to a CV, because having that help with with a CV definitely is that's a major advantage than having than actually having to create a CV. So if we actually ask people what we want in an application form, they don't have to create a CV and they don't have to create a cover letter. And then when we're looking at criteria, do we really need a graduate entry role or a graduate program to have 2 years work experience through internships? We probably don't, because we're probably actually training them up enough. And do we need to know their Leaving Cert results? Surely a first in their degree is enough. We probably don't need to know, and certainly not their junior cert results, which are seen on an application form recently. So then for when we actually get them in as new hires, we need to look at like things like dress code. So being really specific with dress code. So if you have a casual Friday, we maybe state what's expected of you to wear on casual Friday. And then you avoid humiliating someone, because I actually heard of someone who turned up in a grad program for casual Friday wearing tracksuit bottoms and a GA jersey, because that's casual. So we have to describe exactly what's expected and what's not allowed. And then expectations. So if you expect a grad program to stay there until till 6 or 7 at night, maybe vocalize that, and then appoint a contact or a buddy. So this could be someone 2 years into the grad program or just finished the grad program, and they can be the point of contact for someone just coming into the grad program. And then supporting staff. So if you expect someone to go to 6 or 7 or even just one black tie event where you're expecting, not that anyone's going to events now, but you're expecting someone to wear a tux or a fancy dress, we're gonna provide a fund, a little pot of money for the tux rental. And then look at where you're doing your outreach. So don't always look down at where you're in. So here in DCU, we do a lot of outreach with Ballymun, but we also go out to Balbriggan, Kilbarrack, other places like that. And then, because the people in Balbriggan will never get that outreach otherwise. And then role models. So look at where we're actually, do we have senior partners? Do we have senior academics? Do we have people who are senior leaders who are from lower socioeconomic disadvantage and can actually be a role model for this? So I think I'm out of time now. So I'm going to say thank you and open it to the floor, and then we can discuss some other stuff.
Thank you very much for that insight, Kim. That was fantastic. We have a question here, and please send your questions to me and I'll read them out. So the first question here is, do you think COVID-19 has caused a greater gap for these hidden disadvantages to become evident?
Yeah, I definitely think so. So you'll see there on the last slide, I actually have work from home. I just didn't get a chance to get to it. So it definitely is. So like if you're on a grad program, if you're Sean and you're on a grad program, but you actually live at home in a 3-bedroom house with 6 siblings, or even just 2 siblings, I'm here with my 2 dogs and I'm just so happy they stayed quiet. But we're working from home, so we're bringing that home life in and connecting it with work. And so the likes of Sean might not actually have a quiet space where he can work and he can take calls. And even just, we're all very, and I think I'm becoming more aware of this and stuff about what the background looks like. And TikTok has actually really opened my eyes to that. It's not just a work thing. Students are actually from lower economic backgrounds are suffering from this as well, where they're actually putting sheets up behind them and stuff like that. So where before it was very easy to hide your disadvantage if you change your accent and you just kind of wore generic clothes, it's becoming, when those two worlds have now collided through, because we're all at home, it's definitely becoming a lot harder to hide that.
Absolutely. That was another question we had, where do you think it's another barrier that people have to consider, that instead of just solely focusing on their work, that now they're considering, am I being judged for entities that really aren't in their control, like their background, something as simple as needing to cover walls. And truly that's just, people don't have the resources or spaces. So we really need these organizations to help people to just the little funds, as you mentioned. And do you think there's a way of looking out for organizations that truly have these resources available for people from different socioeconomic backgrounds that maybe need some resources for suits for black tie events, and how they truly know they're being honest rather than just ticking a box to say we're inclusive?
Yeah, definitely, and that's always kind of the worry. And just going back to the COVID-19 thing, we seen that largely with problems with the leave insert because people didn't actually have laptops. That and in college that really created a rift, and that was where the divide hit. But definitely for this, so organizations, and it's always a worry that organizations kind of are worried about tokenism and worried about kind of just appearing that, oh look, we're really inclusive. We've, I don't know, Ted here, who's the senior partner, and he's from socioeconomic disadvantaged background. Aren't we great? But I'd always say provide the supports, and if you look like that, you look like that. But it's better to have them and appear slightly inclusive than not have them and appear very uninclusive. So by providing the supports, and then you need to start looking at deeper, like looking at your outreach, especially your recruitment and your retainment of staff, and looking through your staff pool. So this is a big thing that is a problem in Ireland, where when we don't actually have criteria. We don't have the class system that the UK has, so we can't ask, what class are you, and an organization did this where they asked to identify their class, and 75% of people ticked working class, because there's a real sense in Ireland that sure, we're all working class, we don't have upper class, we rarely have middle class. But true things like asking for your educational background, your parents' educational background, and I think especially Roderick O'Gorman bringing this in and having those actual stated criteria will really help. And I'll always say that you'll never know if you're inclusive unless you ask your staff, and then you'll really know. So in Ireland, I think it's like 20-30% are considered socioeconomically disadvantaged. So when you ask your staff and you see, oh, we actually only have 1%, that it's just optics. Whereas if you ask your staff and suddenly it's 20-30%, it's actually working. And always, if you ask and it is 1%, that's okay, because now you know that you have to do more. And that's the important bit, that if it's only 1% and you say, oh, we've got all these supports for staff who are already part of the organization, but no supports for staff for people wanting to join the organization or trying to get socioeconomically disadvantaged people into the organization, and that's for optics, because you're not trying to increase that 1%, you're keeping it at 1%. So we should always be trying to increase it up to that 20-30%, and then supporting the staff that are there.
Absolutely, very well said. And please keep sending your questions in. These are great. We have another one here. How can people educate themselves about these hidden disadvantages, and maybe how could I assess my own privilege?
Yeah, so educating you. So there's started already to be a lot more articles around this, because it's looking at becoming the 10th ground, and because Roderick O'Gorman has thankfully opened up this space. But so I'd always say we don't have that much research on it in Ireland, but there is things like, there's an Irish Times article every year looking at how only 15% of DEIS schools from second level got into third level, whereas 92% of fee-paying did. There's loads of articles out there, but then we can actually look to the UK, who are far more developed in this way of thinking, and they actually have the Social Mobility Fund, Foundation and the fund, and they've got lots of kind of research into this. So I always look over there, because they are more advanced in this area than we are, and kind of try and come up with ideas around that. And then for assessing your own privilege, like I'm from Ballymun, like Sean is slightly, I know him, but he's slightly also, that character is slightly based on me, because I'm from Ballymun. I was born in the Coombe, and my birthday is the 10th of November 1990, and all those things. So I based that on me. But when it got to Sean going to a DEIS primary school, I actually went to a very advantaged primary school, that I got put in a minibus and driven half an hour down the road to, because my parents recognized that that was going to be my first roadblock. So let's get over that roadblock and send her to a different school. And so I know that while I'm from Ballymun and I can say, oh my God, I'm from Ballymun, I get this. I get it to a point, and I get the whole address thing and stuff like that, that I've often, when I was younger, address on my address on my job application and stuff, I might put my aunt's address. But I know to a certain point that I don't actually suffer from that privilege. So just looking at kind of those little advantages you got in life compared to other people, but as well, even the most privileged person, David's parents could have gotten divorced and suddenly he's at a disadvantage. He could have, he could have a death. Everyone has different levels of privilege. It's just, I suppose, assessing that in ourselves.
Brilliant. And Kim, I think we have time for one more question here. What about culture? How does someone from a lower socioeconomic background assimilate into a culture that might be predominantly middle class, so private school, rugby, or etc.?
Yeah, and this is always the tough bit. And I think the lower, so the person will always assimilate very quickly. Like even I know a story of someone who a partner in a big firm, and he sat around a table, he got invited to a dinner, and suddenly the first thing that they had to do was go around, say their name and say what secondary school they went to. They were men in their 50s, and that was just bizarre to me, but it caused him a lot of anxiety because he'd always hidden his background from everyone else. And that's the thing, you assimilate by hiding your accent, your address, and things like that. Whereas I think we need to start looking at how we change the culture to welcome that person in, so they don't actually have to hide themselves. And part of doing that is actually by getting people to the role models. You will find that there are senior leaders in your organization who are from Ballymun, Finglas. I experienced this when I was doing my PhD. I actually 4 professors in my school in DCU were actually from Ballymun and Finglas, but they never spoke about that fact because there was everyone else was from better backgrounds. So suddenly we started speaking about that in there, and everyone else kind of felt, and if a senior leader is the one speaking about it, suddenly other senior leaders begin to go, oh, they got to where they are, even though they're from there, it mustn't be that big of a thing. And then especially bringing it away from school, like what school you went to is, in your 50s, we certainly shouldn't be talking about the secondary school we went to. And then as well, kind of what, even down to kind of what college you went to and things like that, we should be kind of guiding conversations around what we're actually interested in. And if it is rugby you're interested in, grand. If I'm in an organization where everyone talks about rugby at lunchtime, I'm going to read the back of the sports page and figure out, did Rob Kearney score a try at the weekend? And they're things that are harder to change. But I think if we start bringing more people in who are, it's harder to change that culture when there's one person from a lower socioeconomic background. Whereas if there's 5 people in a group of 15, that's 33%. Suddenly, those 5 people can start to steer those conversations into things other than like, did you play a match did you play a rugby match at the weekend? Where do you golf?
Thank you, Kim. I think that was a very, very good insight and presentation. And if anyone else has any more questions, please send it to our email there and we'll get back to you. So thank you everyone for joining us. And if you would like to hear more about our Soundbite series, please register your interest in the form we sent below. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.